am really loving this book.
This is a great book.
Oh, I'm so happy. Hello, my name is Nina. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, I am doing a reading vlog where I reread books that I gave 5 stars in the past. Now, I've had this video idea for a while, but I was kind of nervous to film because I was very nervous that if I were to reread these books, I would not love them as much as I did when I first read them. Because I've grown a lot as a reader, my tastes have changed. Obviously, I am like older now, so there's a lot of room for error here, but I do think it is such a special feeling of revisiting a world that you loved before and knowing that you get to experience that again in a way. So in this video I am rereading 3 books that I read originally like 2 or 3 years ago, so it is pretty far away and I have a pretty bad memory, so with most of these books I didn't really know exactly what was gonna happen anymore. Like obviously I know the storyline vaguely, but like the big plot twists or like many of the reveals I just kind of forgot about. So I think that makes it a little bit more fun to reread these books, because if you still know every single thing, I don't know if it will be as enjoyable. So let's just get into it and start rereading the first book. So the first book I am reading for this video is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now originally I rated this book 4.5 stars, so not a full 5 star, but still a very high rating, and I think it will be interesting to see how it holds up and if I still like it as much. The first time I read this was October 2021, which is almost 3 years ago, and I think my opinions of books has changed quite a bit. I think I've grown to appreciate more poetic books and books that make me like emotional more. So I'm curious. I don't really remember. I remember a little bit of like the ending and the plot twists, but not everything. And I think that is the main reason why I liked it so much last time, that like the ending really took me by surprise, and I think it might have made me emotional. I don't really know actually. So I'm curious to see how it will hold up. Now I'm also annotating this so I can give it to my best friend after. I've already read until page 60, so I'm going to read a little bit more right now, and I will keep you updated on how I feel about it. A couple of hours later and I made it to page 115, and I am really loving this book. So far it's not yet a 5 star, I think. I just think that the way Taylor Jenkins Reid writes is so immersive, and it's such a... I just keep wanting to keep going, even though it's not like there's plot twists or there's like cliffhangers or anything like that. It just... I'm so immersed in the story that I just want to keep being in this world and I don't want to stop. And that's pretty impressive, especially because in this book you switch POVs a lot. There's 6 different POVs I think so far, and between those there's even time switches, so there's 2 POVs in the past and 4 POVs in the present. So between all that you would think that maybe you would be taken out of the story a little bit every time you switch POVs, but I just want to keep going. I just want to keep reading. If you have not heard of this book is about a family called the Rivas, and there's 4 children and the 2 parents. And in this story you follow all the children and also the parents when they met. And pretty much all of them are famous in their own ways. Some of them are surfers, the father is a musician. And I think one of my favorite things about this book is that there is... I think this was the first book Taylor Jenkins Reid wrote in this universe, but almost all of the characters that you know from other books that she wrote are in this book. So for example, when I first read this book, Carrie Soto is Back was not out yet, but Carrie Soto is in this book as like a side character, and Mick Riva, one of the main characters in this book, is in almost all of the Taylor Jenkins Reid books that have come out since as a side character. So in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, in Carrie Soto is Back, and in Daisy Jones and the Six, Mick Riva is a side character in all of those books. But there's also just like little hints to, for example, like in The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, there's little magazine cutouts and like stories printed as if they were in like magazines or papers, and those magazines and papers also get mentioned in this book. So I think if you've read all of her other books, or at least the books that have come out since, this is really fun because you recognize a lot of the characters, but they're definitely not a big part of this story. Like, this story is completely separate, but it's still fun to see these characters appear as like small side characters. The present timeline of this book takes place in one day. In the evening there's supposed to be a party, but you follow all of the brothers and sisters in the full day leading up to this party and what they are up to. And then in the past timeline, you follow the full love story of the parents falling in love, getting to know each other, and all that happens with them. And so far, I'm definitely most into the past timeline and the reading about the parents, but I think that's kind of the point because that's also what you're getting the most of right now. And then I think later in the book, once the party starts, you will get more details about like the present timeline. But yeah, so far I am really loving this book. I don't feel like it's a 5-star yet, but this definitely has potential to be a 5-star again if it makes me feel like big feelings maybe at the end of the book. So we'll see. My cat is currently really upset with me because I haven't fed him yet, even though it is not yet his feeding time. So if you hear screaming, you know that it's just my cat. Alright, I have finished Malibu Rising and I want to give you my thoughts. So as a little recap, I gave this book 4.5 stars in 2021. And when I read it now, I really understand why I gave it such a high rating. I think Taylor Jenkins Reid has a way of taking you along with a story that feels so natural and so like everything in this book made a lot of sense. Even though this book introduces a bunch of different characters, it shows you like a bunch of different perspectives, but they all add something to the story. Now I think this time around I liked the first half of the book the best, because in the first half you are in the perspective of the parents of like the main characters a lot of the time, and I really enjoyed their story. Like, you follow the parents as they meet, as they fall in love, as they go through troubles, and how as they become parents and like get children. All of those things were things that I really enjoyed reading about. And then halfway through the book you fully switch to the children's perspective and you learn a lot more about their lives, and still I thought that was very interesting. It just didn't grip me the same way as the parents' love story did. Also, the ending just didn't really make me emotional in the way that it did the first time I read this. Now, I didn't really remember the ending, so I don't think it was because I already saw it coming, because I didn't. There was one part of the ending that I remembered, but not everything, so I don't think that was a big part of it. I just think that, I don't know, it didn't grip me in the same way. I do think this book was incredibly well written and the concept of the storyline is really interesting. So my rating for now is 4 stars. Still an incredible book, but just not as good as I thought it was the first time. Not that it is in any way a worse book, I just think that I kind of outgrew a story like this now that I've read more and I grew a little bit older. Now, the next book I am going to read for this video is Out of Love by Hazel Hayes. And I chose this book because this is a book that I read before I even really got back into reading. This book came out, I think, in 2020. This book came out in 2020 and I ordered it right away because Hazel Hayes is someone that I followed online for a while. So when I saw she wrote a book, I was like, I really want to read that. And then I ordered it and I read it. In my memory, it was like in a day, but I think it was like very quickly for me at the time. I got into reading in like the summer of 2021. So the fact that I read this in 2020, I think it was one of 3 books I read that year. I read this peak COVID time. I remember that I actually had it shipped to my boyfriend's house because I was quarantining there at the moment, and I read most of it there. And I just remember this book as it being one of the most beautiful love stories I've ever read. And obviously the question is, was that because I just hadn't read that many love stories? But I also quite recently, a few months ago, lent this book out to Leora and she also gave it 5 stars. So I have very high hopes that I will still really enjoy this, because the premise of this book is that it starts with a breakup and you kind of work your way backwards to the point where they met, I think. And I don't necessarily remember anything that happened in this book, but I just remember feeling so touched by it, because I think the premise of starting at the end and knowing the whole book through that this is going to end, but still experiencing all of the parts where they are falling in love, is just something really magical and really special. And I absolutely loved it the first time I read it. So I have very, very, very high hopes that I will still love this book to this day. I really, really hope that I like this as much as I did the first time. So we will see. To page 72 and I am very pleased to say that I still, or again, love this book so far. Like I mentioned, this book is a love story in reverse, which means that I just read like the breakup part of this story. I just read the conversations this couple had, the reasoning behind this breakup, and the way it is written is so emotional and so beautiful. But also, even though we don't know these characters very well yet, I can feel the emotions so deeply. I think maybe because it's such a universal feeling of like loving someone but it not being enough and trying to fix it, but like there's nothing you can do. That feeling is described so beautifully in this book. I've just been sitting here, it's a rainy evening, I have my candles, I have a cup of tea, I am crocheting and listening to this audiobook, and I'm having the best time. I already almost cried. Oh, I'm so happy. I'm already getting this like 5-star feeling in my chest where I'm not necessarily having so much fun reading this book because obviously it's very emotional, but I'm enjoying this book so much. It's so beautiful. There is quite a big rainstorm going on, so you can probably hear that in the background. I'm sorry if you can. But I just finished reading Out of Love. I love this book. I think the concept of this book is incredible. One of the things that is so well done is that you go back in time in this book. So you start at the breakup and then you end at the meeting place. And that means that there are references in parts of this book that reference things that happened earlier. For example, in the beginning of this book, they mention a Paris trip. And eventually, in around the middle of this book, you read about the Paris trip. And that is very well done. It is done in a way that makes you curious without it seeming too obvious and without it like being cliche in a way. Like, reading the breakup really gripped me, even though I didn't know the couple yet, even though I didn't know the reasons why they broke up. And usually in a breakup, the setting is like, oh, they're referencing all these things that you've read about earlier, but here obviously that wasn't the case. You read about that later. But reading a love story that you know is doomed and that you know will end is just, it's very painful, but it's really beautiful as well. Now, would I give this book 5 stars again? I don't know. I think I might have given it 4.5 stars if I read it now. The ending did really grip me again, but I think I've just become a little bit more critical before I give a book 5 stars. But I'm not going to change my rating. This still feels like a 5 star to me. I think this just like, the memory of reading this is still 5 stars, if that makes sense. And this is definitely a book that I keep thinking about, a couple that I keep thinking about. I don't know, I really love this book, and I feel like I don't see people talking about it online very much. So if you've never heard of this, please, please, please consider picking it up, because it's so good. Do check trigger warnings, because there is a mention of some heavy topics in this. This book is incredible and I loved reading it. Good morning, it is the next day. I am wearing a dark academia outfit. I am about to go to work, but I wanted to read a chapter before work. So before I start this book, I wanted to introduce it. This book is one of those books that I keep forgetting about, but I also cannot stop thinking about. Like, there are certain scenes in this book that have gripped onto me and I am still thinking about them. But I also know that the second I finished this book, the first thing that I said was, I want to reread it and like re-experience this whole thing. I don't know if I fully remember the plot twist. I don't think I do, but maybe if I start reading it will come back to me. I just remember that I was so invested in this book and I was so obsessed with it and I didn't want to stop reading and I couldn't stop thinking about these characters. The last couple of days it has been real fall weather, like rainstorms and just like cold, so I have been so excited to start this book. So I'm going to start reading it now, and I really, really hope that I love it as much as I did the last time. I've annotated it. I forgot. That's so fun. I've never reread a book that I've annotated before. Alright, I reached page 200 of If We Were Villains last night, and I am so into this book. Once again, I have a theory about the ending, but I just don't remember if that is the actual ending. I still do think that it could be the ending, but I'm not sure. I just don't fully remember. I am now halfway through this book, which means I have had a review. It's not the review. Obviously that will come at the end. But there is definitely like a big twist in the middle, and that got me completely hooked again. Since that moment, I just haven't been able to stop thinking about this book and reading it. And I think in the beginning I was already very into this book, but mostly just because the way these characters are described and also the way language is used in this book is something that really appeals to me. I write poetry, and a lot of this book is like poetry in a way, but also just like the main character of this book appreciates the art of language so much that it's just really nice to read. So anyway, I am so far really, really enjoying this once again. I have a free night and I had a rough day at work, so I'm going to turn on some candles, make some tea, and continue reading. I'm very excited.
Alright, I have a cold, so you can probably hear that, but I just finished this book and I wanted to give you my first thoughts. I think the ending of this book is so clever and so well written. Like, I remembered part of the ending. I think about a quarter or 1/3 of the like big reveal was what I remembered as the ending, and I fully thought that was the full ending. So there definitely were some surprises for me, even though I had already read it. But this is one of those books where the last page just makes you want to rethink all of the book, especially because a lot of this book is Shakespeare quotes, and I am definitely not a Shakespeare expert at all. I kind of just want to look up all of the important scenes and like analyze what they mean, and I think that if you do know Shakespeare, this will be really fun. I don't know, maybe it's like very shitty and it doesn't work at all, but for me, I think I would really, this makes me want to like deep dive into the plays that they talk about and they perform. So I think it still is a 5-star, even though I enjoyed it I think a little bit less. I still really love this book, and especially also because the vibes of this book, the way they describe like the surroundings and where they live and the seasons and the everything is just like so well done. It's so immersive. This is a great book.
So that is the end of today's video. I really hope you enjoyed watching it. If you did, please let me know, and also let me know what book you might want to reread that you really loved before, or that you have given 5 stars. I think this was a very interesting view into how I've grown as a reader, what type of books I used to love and what type of books I love now. Even though it's scary, I definitely recommend choosing a book that you used to love and trying it again. So thank you so much for watching, and I will hopefully see you again next week. Bye!